Have you ever been told by someone that you are too much, that you are too intense or too sensitive or too ambitious or too emotional, that you sort of feel everything and think constantly? I know that's certainly things that I've heard in my life before and challenges that I've encountered. And what I found, and so many of the people that I work with have found, is that when the emotions really hit sensitive high achievers, they hit us really hard. And today I want to talk about emotional regulation for people who feel deeply and who strive relentlessly. So for those emotional high achievers out there. So if you're the kind of person who's both empathetic and driven, this one is definitely for you. I'm Dr. Alan Johnson, and on this channel, I talk about the mind, well-being, productivity, and change for thinkers, makers, and everyone in between. So feel free to subscribe or leave a comment. I read every single one. Let me first of all go through what we'll be covering in today's video. First of all, I want to talk about why emotional intensity is oftentimes misunderstood in high achievers. Then we'll look at some of the hidden neuroscience behind emotional dysregulation when we are wired for depth in our lives, when we're looking for meaning. What does neuroscience tell us about what's going on up here? I'll then introduce 3 practical tools that you can use to help you recalibrate in those moments when the emotions seem to get very big and very strong. And then I'll bring it all together with a short, gentle closing exercise that ties it all together. And if you're looking for something that you can start today, a program to follow through with, I'll also speak a little bit about the end, about my 30-day at-home reset course that I've created. It takes just a few minutes a day, but really contributes to some positive changes. So more on that coming up in a moment. But let's begin with a truth that I wish more people said aloud. Being emotionally intense and ambitious is not a flaw. We sometimes think that it is because we very oftentimes get messages from those around us that we are too emotional, too driven, too intense, too intuitive, too ambitious, whatever it might be. This is not a flaw. It's just a unique wiring, and it's something that we can learn to better understand within ourselves so that it's supporting us rather than limiting us. Because if we think about people like Virginia Woolf or Nikola Tesla or Frida Kahlo, people whose minds moved really fast and really deep, and whose inner lives were fierce, there's no better word for it, and whose outward lives were sometimes hard to contain. We find something of a paradox in figures like that because we oftentimes admire the outcomes. We admire the brilliance and the innovation and the artistry, but we forget the cost behind that as well. The emotional volatility, the sense of overwhelm, those moments of freezing or spiraling that came with that intense sensitivity and an ability to think so deeply. And there's a name for this particular dynamic. It's called the gifted adult, or the twice exceptional high performer. But I prefer to think of it as a form of just how we are wired. Because you're not simply a high achiever, you are someone who is coming with gifts and responsibilities. And crucially, that gift comes with emotional patterns that can be managed if we learn how to do so. So let's now talk about the mechanics of emotional regulation for high achievers. When we are talking about emotional regulation, we're really talking about how the nervous system interprets and responds to external stimuli. So the things that happen outside of us, whether they are particular events or circumstances or reactions from others, those are out of our control. Those are external, but those need to be interpreted by our nervous system in order to enable us to make sense of them. And we do have a little bit of control over that process of interpretation. It doesn't always seem like it, but we do. High achievers with deeply sensitive views of the world often have overactive limbic systems, particularly the amygdala, the part of the brain. It's like our inner security alarm. So for someone who is emotionally tuned in, that internal security alarm, our amygdala, goes off not only in response to threats, but it also goes off in response to perceived failure or ambiguity or relational tension. I live in London on a busy street, and some days there will be a car alarm outside that goes off, and it is going off all afternoon. That's kind of what can happen with the amygdala. The amygdala is meant to switch on and to help us rechart a different course. But if the amygdala is activated consistently, that's not going to be leading us to any place that's particularly helpful or healthy for us. And what's more, the prefrontal cortex, so right up here, that's the part of the brain that is responsible for reflection and regulation. It gets temporarily hijacked by that stress. So it sort of gets shoved out of the command chair, and the stress mechanisms come into play. And this means that despite all of your knowledge and self-reflection and training on well-being, you can find yourself emotionally reactive, or you can shut down, or you can feel yourself flooded with emotions. This isn't some sort of a moral failing. This isn't that you are too much or that you are too emotional. It's not about willpower. It's about biology. But here is the good news. It is a plastic biology in the sense that you can shift it and you can train it. And that's exactly why I created my online course, Integrative Meditation Level 1. It takes just a few minutes a day, and it's designed specifically for people who think and feel really deeply. It helps you begin to recalibrate and to slow down. I'll pop a link below if you're curious about this, and there's lots of sample content there so you can see what it looks like and how it will fit into your life. But now I want to move on to the practical for right now. 3 tools that you can use regularly to help you when things become too big, too emotional, too intense. First one is the 90-second rule, or the fancy scientific term for it is somatic containment. The phrase that caught on is 90-second rule. That's sometimes what you will see it referred to as in books and online. Neuroscientist Jill Bolt-Taylor points out that the physiological lifespan of an emotion is just 30 seconds. Okay, I want to explain that in a little bit more detail. First of all, emotions are real. Emotions are physiological changes in our body that are attempting to draw our attention to something. Okay, so we're not saying here that we ignore or disregard what emotions are telling us. However, those physiological changes that an emotion creates, neuroscience shows us, last for 90 seconds unless we continue to feed it. So let's imagine that a negative or limiting emotion emerges: sadness, guilt, upset, disappointment, fear, anxiety, stress. Okay, those are real physiological movements in our body. When we begin to feel them, if we begin to lean into that experience, if we begin to allow our mind to find more things to be anxious about, more things to be stressed about, more prior conversations to replay in our brain, what are we doing? We are feeding that original emotion. It's kind of like when you feed your sourdough starter and it grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. If you don't feed your sourdough starter, it doesn't get any bubbles and you can't bake bread with it. And that's kind of what an emotion is on its own. It lasts for 90 seconds and then the lifespan ends. So when something activates or triggers you, just pause for a moment, just set a timer and feel that emotion in your body without adding narrative to it. Adding narrative to it or adding additional support or context to it is feeding it. All you can do instead is recognize that you are experiencing that emotion, which is a physiological movement in your body, but it is not the entire truth. This is a skill that we can practice. It doesn't come easily or intuitively, but the more that we practice, the more that we find that ability to find that brief pause when our biggest emotions come up, the more we recognize them for what they are. Momentary cues that rely upon our subsequent thought patterns to gain further energy. So let's stop feeding them, or at least practice stop feeding those big emotions when they emerge. So the second tool we can use is naming it to tame it. So Dan Siegel's work reminds us that labeling an emotion activates the prefrontal cortex and lowers amygdala activity. So that's what we want to do. We want to realign control to that front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and move that control away from the amygdala. The amygdala is that car alarm, which is going to be going off. The prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that can actually help us regulate. So when we notice a big emotion emerging, we can pause. That's the first step. And then we can name it. And there's a really, really important way that we name it. Instead of saying, I am overwhelmed, that's saying that, we are synonymous with the emotion that we are feeling, that we are overwhelmed in the present and presumably into the future as well. Instead, what if we name the experiences that we are feeling? I notice anxiety in my chest. I feel heat rising in my stomach. I feel tension in my shoulders. I feel my breath quickening. When we name the physiological changes in our body, we are activating the prefrontal cortex, and we are taking some of the heat and fire out of that big emotion we're feeling. Again, this isn't about denying emotions. This isn't about repressing our big feelings. This is about noticing when they emerge, allowing them to sit and stay as long as they need, which is about 90 seconds, and then allowing us to move on in a different way afterwards. And the final tip I have for you here is reverse visualization. This comes to us from Stoic philosophy, and it seems a little bit counterintuitive because instead of visualizing your goals and success, so as a high achiever, how much time do you spend visualizing you getting that promotion or visualizing you not getting that promotion? Instead, try visualizing your nervous system calming down, closing your eyes, imagining your spine lengthening and your gut softening and that emotional charge draining down your legs and into the earth. Practicing that even for 2 minutes a day, feeling that sense of a hold on the future, of a future visualization draining out of your body can be very, very useful. So let's now do a brief exercise together. If you'd like, you can close your eyes or just lower your eyes now very gently, just connecting with the breath. Just taking a moment now to pause, just feeling your feet, feeling your legs, feeling your hips and belly, feeling your hands and arms and shoulders, feeling your neck and chest. Noticing your breath now as your arms rest gently in your lap. And giving yourself permission in this moment not to optimize, not to fix, not to perform, but just to be. Just for this moment, there's no place else to be, nothing else that you need to be doing, just this. And breathing in that sense of enjoyment that you feel, that sense of ease and comfort that this reassurance brings. And that alone is radical. That alone can help you change your life. You can open your eyes now and just see if you can carry those reflections into the rest of your day. And if this video spoke to something in you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which of these tools might you want to try this week? Have you used these tools before? What's your go-to for grounding yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed? And don't forget, you can find the link to Integrative Meditation Level 1 below. It's a really gentle, secular practice that's made for everyday life, not a sort of idealized version of it. And if you'd like to stay in this conversation around emotional life and spiritual practice and sustainable excellence, feel free to subscribe or share this with someone who you think might need this. Until next time, be kind to yourself. I'll see you then.